I don't know what's going on right now with OBS or my internet. This is getting ridiculous. Guys, I'm sorry. This is just sad. All right. So hopefully this stays around. We're back. Bitrate is shit. I'm refreshing. Just keep refreshing the page, guys. That's all I can say is just keep refreshing the page. I don't know what is going on and why I had 0 bits there. That's some bullshit. Are you guys back? Says I have 0 viewers at the moment. Okay. Yeah, it just helps to refresh the page. Okay. Alrighty. I'm gonna go back again and do this. Miss Lilia, um, about Lucy. Please take good care of her. Sylphie's expression was heavy with guilt. Yes, my lady. I will take care of everything while you're away. Lilia bowed her head. I know it's not good to leave her behind like this, but I just. Lilia shook her head. You need not worry. This is the very reason you have a maid like me here. Lucy had started to speak simple words such as names of family members or pets like Mama, Asha, Lala, Oxy, Bibi, Dillo. My heart trembled with emotion watching how hard she worked to get the words out. She had yet to call me Dada. She would occasionally, she would say Rudy sometimes, but not Dada. I hadn't expected much time with her. I hadn't spent much time with her lately, so my name would probably be the last one she learned. And now, Sylphie and I were going to leave her behind to go on a trip. I had a feeling the two of us hadn't quite grasped what it meant to be parents yet, especially me. I had no idea when the day would come. I did think Lucy was the most adorable angel, but thinking that wasn't the same thing as actually being a parent, was it? So I won't see you again for 4 months? It will be lonely, Roxy said, crestfallen. I wasn't just leaving my child behind, but a pregnant wife, too. I felt awful about that. Well, I'm not sure. I would like to return before you give birth, if possible, I said. Don't worry, take your time. As long as I have Miss Lilia and Aisha by my side when it's time, I don't need you here. In exchange, I'd like you to bring me back a souvenir. I would love to eat some of Asura Kingdom's sweet and sour candies. Those dried fruits slathered in sugar, those are delicious. Roxy was back to her usual poker face. She was probably anxious since this would be her first birth, but she didn't let any of that inner turmoil show. That's a pitiful look you have on your face, Rudy. Oh, that's a pitiful look you have on your face, Rudy, she continued. I have no idea what you're worried about, but in the Meagard tribe it's natural for the men to go out hunting, while the women stay at home to protect the house and children. She puffed out her chest as she spoke. Ever the reliable wife. I knew everything would probably turn out fine if I left it in her hands. But could I really justify leaving her like this? It's a bit of a shame, though, since I finally got this long vacation, Roxy sighed. I thought I'd be able to spend it quietly with you. Yeah, I wish we could have done that. Roxy had taken time off until the baby's birth. In Renoa, it was normal for a wife to quit her job when she got pregnant so she could focus on raising her child, but Roxy wanted to continue being a professor, so she persuaded Genius to give her some maternity leave. I didn't learn until afterward that she had used my name to get her way, but if that got her what she wanted, then by all means. There was still a little time left before our departure. I decided to spend the spare minutes and hours I could find with Roxy. That night I heard Sylphie and Eris's heated voices spilling from the latter's room. Sylphie would say something and Eris would snap back. From the other side of the door I caught Eris shouting words like, "Why?" and How come? Each time Sylphie would respond calmly and gradually. Eris' tone grew quieter until, at the end, she finally mumbled, Fine, I get it. Later, Eris came to my room. Just as I had crawled into bed and was about to fall asleep, she sullenly burrowed under the covers and wrapped her arms around me, pulling me close as one would a body pillow, her soft, ample breast pressed against me. Oh, not very chivalrous if you sneak in here in the middle of the night and tempt me with those. Not that I minded. I was a gentleman of the night myself, as far as sex was concerned anyway. But before we got into that, there was one thing I needed to ask. Did you have a fight with Sylphie? No, she huffed. Okay. I hadn't heard any fists flying. It was possible that if I slipped from bed and went to Eris's room, I might find Sylphie passed out on the floor, but I decided to take her word for it. Starting tomorrow, I'll be tagging along with Sylphie, Eris said. We're going to meet with Ghislaine and help get things ready. Ariel had already begun making preparations. She was going to pull out of the academy to return home, and the short notice meant packing was a nightmare. She also had to make calls to various people in the region, which was probably why Eris had been asked to help out as a bodyguard. So in the meantime, Eris continued, she wants you to spend as much time as you can with Roxy. She? You mean Sylphie? I asked in surprise. Yep. So that was why the two were having a row. Sylphie was trying to be considerate of Roxy, and if I had less on my plate to deal with, then I could spend more time with her. She'd really thought this through. Still, I was shocked she'd managed to persuade Eris without having to throw down. Eris sure had matured. She was no longer the same girl who pummeled people indiscriminately. If you made a well-reasoned argument, she would actually hear you out. That's why she said I could have you tonight, Eris said. Perhaps I spoke too soon. Apparently, Eris had set her own conditions. Even so, it was still impressive that she agreed to Sylphie's proposal. She had mellowed out. She had been so self-centered all those years ago. Now that was gone. Her raging passion had cooled, and her clenched fist would no longer find their way to faces. The berserker princess was dead, and the wild monkey silenced. The mad wolf claimed by eternal sleep. The heiress who had bared her teeth at everyone was gone forever. Nah, this is probably an exception. It was just like Sylphie to give up her turn with me as part of their agreement. Setting aside her own desires, I would have to do my best to shower her with kindness while we were on our trip. Preoccupied with those thoughts, I wrapped my arms around Eris. Almost immediately, she began tearing my clothes off. You know, I said, it'd be awful timing if you found out you were pregnant on the trip. Maybe we should take today easy and we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. And she had her way with me that night, just like she always did. Family planning were clearly words that did not exist in her dictionary. The following day, Cliff happened to come by for a visit. Hey, Rudy's, if you're free tonight, want to go out to eat? It was a dinner invitation, and the only people going were Cliff, Zenobia, and I. I'd never had a boys' night out. Normally, when we did this, Sylphie, Linelise, and a number of others would tag along. Maybe this time the other lads planned on going somewhere too raunchy for the girls. Or maybe they wanted to discuss something that would be too awkward to bring up with women present. All right, I said. Whatever the case, I instantly agreed. I had no reason to turn him down, and more importantly, I had a favor I wanted to ask him anyway, so this was perfect timing. The sun was beginning to set when I met Cliff and Zenobia at the agreed-upon spot. The restaurant they brought me to was more posh than the places we usually frequented. As we entered, I paused to check the sign out front, which read, The Red Sea Eagle. This was a name trending in the three magic nations. Places with eagle in the name were typically restaurants, while falcon was for bars and pubs, bat for brothels, and horse for inns. Granted, not every establishment followed this nomenclature. Some places would start out serving excellent alcohol, but then the proprietor improved their cooking skills and food became their mainstay. It was surprisingly common, in fact. So the naming trend was more like a general guideline. The Red Sea Eagle was exactly the kind of place Cliff would select. Sophisticated and luxurious. The customers were mostly minor nobility or rich merchants. One of the staff guided us to a stylish room. According to them, this was the third best room they had to offer. Had we known Lord Rudius was paying us a visit, we would have prepared one of the better rooms, they said, but there was no need to apologize on my account. So this was what luxury restaurants look like, huh? When Cliff said we would be going out to dinner, I figured we'd be getting some casual chow, but this place actually had dinner courses. The four of us took our seats at the square table. Now then, Rudius, do you know why we came here? Why we specifically reserved a room to speak with you? Cliff asked, brow furrowed. He seemed sort of angry, and I had a feeling I knew why. Is today your birthday? I asked. My birthday has already passed, Cliff replied dryly, unamused by my joke. Hold on, is he 20 now, or 21? He was baby-faced, so he looked 5 years younger than he actually was, but by this world's standards, he'd long reached adulthood. Some people already had 2 or 3 children by his age. We are here for something else, Cliff said. All right. I sat up straighter. Apparently we were about to have a serious conversation. You see, knowing Cliff, it was probably about Orsted. I had sworn I would fill him in on the details about what happened with Orsted when I returned home after getting beaten to a pulp, but I never did make good on that promise. I figured he'd called me here to give me an earful. Regarding the child Linalise and I are having, I've been thinking of calling it Clive if it's a boy, and Ella Clarice if it's a girl. What do you think? Wait, a name? That's what we came here for today? So I had the complete wrong idea? Basically, we will be going with Millis-style naming if it's a boy, and Elf-style naming if it's a girl. What are your thoughts, Rudius? Cliff turned toward me. Well, Clive sounds like the name of a clever man with good odds of making it as a politician, but it also sounds like a name of someone with a fussy personality would have. Ella Clarice is a pretty name and has a nice ring to it, although I can't help feeling she might have a bad encounter with a thief in her future, or one who would steal something important from her, like her heart. That was about what I figured you'd say, Cliff replied as he leaned back in his chair, gazing at the ceiling. After a moment, he looked back at me, his expression tight. Actually, that was a joke. We'd already decided on the names. While I do appreciate your input, that isn't why I brought you here today. Oh, so he was just pulling my leg. Couldn't have done it with a straighter face. If you're gonna mess around, at least smile a bit. Both you and Zenoba look stiff as statues, you know. Surely you've already guessed what it is about, Rudius. It's related to your actions as of late. Cliff jabbed a finger in my direction. Zenoba nodded in agreement. He also seemed a bit irate. Master, no matter what you've decided to do, I have every intention of following you to the bitter end. That said, do you not think you have been a bit too secretive with us lately? You think so? I shrugged. Out of nowhere, you asked us to start building this insanely powerful armor for you. Midway through creating it, you begin giving us extremely specific advice. You wouldn't even share who you were going up against, and then we find out it's one of the 7 great... Zenoba was interrupted mid-sentence by the door swinging open. A staff member entered, carrying our drinks. Zenoba flinched and snapped his mouth shut, quietly waiting for them to finish distributing the beverages. Once they left, he resumed the conversation. While I suspected they had reserved this room to keep our conversation private, their attitudes made it clear it was partly out of fear of Orsted. We find out your opponent is one of the 7 great powers, the dragon god Orsted, Zenoba finished. And not only that, since you went all out in battle, you completely decimated an entire forest. Nah, it's still there. Well, half of it, anyway, I said. Zenoba ignored my defense and continued. And after all that, you capitulated. I had no other choice. For him to bring you to your knees without killing you, after you wore that armor and threw everything you had at him. The man must be a monster. It's the only explanation. Well, in a sense, Orsted was a type of monster. It was bad enough that he could nullify spells from a distance, but I didn't stand a chance against him in melee or combat either. Not that I was particularly skilled myself, but I'd still thought I could put up a decent fight. Since you didn't seem to be too torn up about it, I assumed the dragon god must be a decent man, but he... Zenoba paused, shivering as he dropped his gaze. After a moment, he shot his head up and loudly declared, "That man is a demon in the flesh! A few days ago I saw him with my own eyes, and I knew in an instant he was our enemy." The two of them had a little scrap last week where Orsted completely knocked Zenoba out. That brief meeting was enough for him to be hit with Orsted's curse. But wait a minute. Until that point, he hadn't thought that poorly of Orsted. Which must mean the curse doesn't activate until someone actually meets him. Come to think of it, Aisha and Norn don't seem as repulsed by him as everyone else. Guess the curse won't affect them as long as they only know of him indirectly. I have to assume you have lost your sanity to serve a man like that. Zenoba shook his head, unable to fathom it. The curse had to be extremely potent for him to have such a strong reaction simply from seeing Orsted once. Personally, I've yet to meet Orsted myself, so I don't know what Zenoba means exactly. Cliff chimed in. But Zenoba, Sylphie, and Roxy all seem to consider him dangerous. If they're all on the same page about him, he must be an evil man. That was a shocking statement coming from a man who never seemed to listen to what other people were saying. However, from the sound of it, Cliff wasn't yet affected by the curse. Agreeing to work under a man like that doesn't sound like the wise Rudius I know, Cliff said. Yeah, well, I'm not particularly wise. Still, this posed a problem. It would be hard to keep going when so many of those closest to me disapproved of Orsted. Well, you've done nothing to dissuade them about it. But when you asked us to repair the magic armor, I finally realized. Cliff grinned smugly. You plan to fight him again, don't you? Dragon God Orsted, I mean. Huh? My jaw dropped. See, this is what happens when you just let shit go and you don't... This is all Rudius's fault for not talking with everybody beforehand and letting them know the details. Shit gets out of hand. This is what Rudius has in common with Ainz. Because they're not clear about stuff and they don't talk things through, misunderstandings happen like this all the time. And now, even if you try to clear up the understanding, the misunderstanding, it's too late. It's too late. You could basically rename Overlord to Misunderstanding the light novel. That's kind of how it works. Everybody misunderstands Ainz. You're only pretending to work under him so you can wait for an opening and pounce. That's your strategy, right? No, Orsted and I... Cliff held up a hand to stop me. You don't have to say anything to me. The whole reason you asked us to improve the mana efficiency of the armor is because you want to make it accessible to Zenoba and me, right? In other words, you plan to have us fight with you eventually. He smirked triumphantly. Well, am I wrong? Yes! You're absolutely wrong! It almost felt silly to argue the matter at this point. It was better to shrug it off and say sure. They'd eventually fight with me, and this was merely preparation for the battle to come. That way they would eventually see for themselves, albeit gradually, that Orsted wasn't such a bad guy. So I started, Master Cliff, then I paused. Given how close we were, I didn't think it was right to sugarcoat things and lie to suit my own self-interest. They might not believe the truth, but I had to at least try telling them. What is it? Actually, I explained, Orsted has a curse placed on him that makes everyone around him hate him. Would you believe me if I told you that? What? Seriously? An evil god tricked me, which is why I got stuck fighting Orsted in the first place. Would you believe that too? An evil god? You mean the one you were worshipping with the panties and the blood-stained cloth? I glared at him. I'll murder you right where you sit if you dare say that again. Huh? Sorry, I guess not that god then. Right. I get what you're saying. Keep going. Whoops, I accidentally let my anger slip for a second there. Even so, it wasn't right to deride another person's religion. Roxy was a righteous goddess. Anyway, that's beside the point. Dude, you brought that shit upon yourself. Once again, Rudy, you reap what you sow. That was how I wound up meeting Orsted. For whatever reason, his curse doesn't work on me. So the two of us were able to talk and work things out. In exchange for his forgiveness, I agreed to work alongside him to combat his this evil god. Do you believe that as well? I certainly won't, said Zenoba, his glasses gleaming in the light. I am skeptical that a man like him would ever volunteer to fight alongside anyone else. Huh. 1 second. Oh, God. Nose itchy. Okay. That's better. Huh. Surprising to hear someone like Zenoba take that kind of stance, Cliff said. He crossed his arms in contemplation. Think about it this way, I said. Zenoba is only interested in dolls and figures, yet he's strangely insistent about his distaste for Orsted. Doesn't that strike you as odd? It has to be an effect from the curse. Well, now that you mention it, Cliff paused. No, when I think about it, Zenoba does care a lot about matters concerning you. If Orsted really is that untrustworthy, it only makes sense for him to worry. Perhaps that was true. Maybe Zenoba really was worried for my well-being. I was grateful that he did care so much. But at the same time, this was one instance where I wish he didn't. Yes, Orsted was hiding some things from me, and I didn't yet know if I could trust him completely. Even so, I wasn't foolish enough to bounce between Orsted and the man-god and risk making enemies of both. Well, guess I had no other choice. I'll just have to lie to them. All right. I understand. In that case, we'll go with Cliff's explanation. My explanation? What do you mean? I cleared my throat. It's as you've said, Master Cliff. I plan to eventually take Orsted down, but it's too early to make a move right now. I'll have to bide my time and do as he asks. What? Are you sure about that? Then what about the conversations we just had? I shrugged. Wishful thinking aloud. It'd be nice if that were the truth. Once Cliff saw Orsted in person, he would likely be in the same boat as Zenoba. It was better to play along with his little theory. With that in mind, I continued, I would appreciate your continued cooperation in the future. I will have your back, Master. In preparation for the next battle with Orsted, I will make armor that even Julie could wear. Great. Looking forward to it. I had no intention of making Julie fight, of course, but knowing he was motivated to go that far was enough. With that out of the way, there is something else I would like to ask of you, I said, turning to Cliff. Yeah? Jesus Christ, you should have been talking about this shit before. Your friends tend to slip your mind a lot. I can relate. I had originally planned to ask him for help combating Orsted's curse, but now I would have to explain it in a way that aligned better with this theory. You see, Orsted is actually protected by a sort of barrier, I said. A barrier? Like a magical one? No, more like a curse. Cliff furrowed his brow. The curse makes it so that when you gaze upon Orsted, you automatically pull back, too intimidated to fight at full strength, I explained. Really? He has a curse like that? Yes. That is the whole reason I lost to him. I assume it must have been the same for you, Zenoba? I asked, turning to him. It did seem as though I had been defeated out of nowhere. I couldn't understand what happened. Now that you mention it, I got the sense that my body wasn't moving the way it normally does. Yeah, that's just your imagination, but I'll keep that to myself. Cliff nodded. I see. Well, a curse like that would be bothersome indeed. Yes, extremely bothersome, I agreed. And for that very reason, I would like to see if you can't do something about this curse of his. But all my research has been centered specifically on Alinalise. I have no idea if it would work for Orsted. Well, if it doesn't, then we'll just have to counter it some other way. But you can't work on your research on Alinalise's curse while she's pregnant, right? So I'd like you to test how much you can weaken the effects of other curses in the meantime. Cliff was trying to become a specialist in curses. While he hadn't managed to completely suppress Alinalise's curse, he had managed to significantly reduce its potency. I hoped that he could next look into weakening Orsted's curse, so he wouldn't strike fear into everyone who looked upon him, or at least not as much as he did now. But are you sure Orsted would agree to participate in such research? How are you going to trick him into it? Cliff asked skeptically. Orsted is like a wolf starving for prey. He hungers for battle. In reality, he's displeased by the effects of the curse as well. Cliff's eyes widen. Really? But it's thanks to that curse that he's got an advantage over his opponents, right? He said it himself. For once, he would like to face an opponent and fight them at full power without them cowering before him. That was a bald-faced lie. I would have to ask Orsted to play along and maintain this farce in front of Cliff. Time to set up my dominoes and let everything fall into place. You mean it? Cliff stared at me in disbelief. Yeah, that's why I need you to dive headfirst into researching him. No holds barred. All right. I don't like deceiving people, but if you're sure about this, I'll give it a shot. Woohoo! You're the best ever, Master Cliff. Miss a Little East, be sure to give him some good loving. With that out of the way, I could slowly start talking Sylphie and the others into seeing my side. Victory would be mine if I found a way to deal with Orsted's curse. Jesus Christ. The biggest idiot. Rudius. On the other hand, the guilt I felt was no laughing matter. Why did I have to lie like this to everyone around me? It wasn't the morality of it that bothered me. Sometimes lies were necessary. Even so, Cliff, Zenobia, Sylphie, Roxy, and Eris were all seriously worried about me. Lying to them made me feel like I was betraying them. I hope we could all laugh about it later, once we managed to lift Orsted's curse. Well, that's that then. I look forward to your continued assistance, Zenobia, Master Cliff. Yes, I'm relieved that you had something up your sleeve after all, Master. Yes, I'm relieved that you had something up your sleeve after all, Master. It's no small task you've given me, but I'll take care of it. With that, we all nodded. Not long later, our food finally arrived. Exquisite dishes lined the table, and we had all the alcohol in our cups, which meant the banquet was ready to commence. I lifted my brimming glass and said, "All right, now that we've finished with the serious discussions, why don't we say cheers and dig in?" "Yes, that's a good idea." Zenobia mirrored my actions. "What shall we raise our glasses to?" Cliff tilted his own cup and said, "Well, there are no girls with us today, so I guess we can toast to male friendship. What do you think? That's a little too sentimental, isn't it?" Sentimental or not, I knew that neither Zenobia nor Cliff would ever betray me when it came down to it. That much was clear from my future self's diary. Cliff had helped me even at the risk of his entire country turning against him. Zenobia had stuck with me even when I became a real piece of shit. They were true, irreplaceable friends. Admittedly, I'd lied to them today, but come what may, till death did us part, I wanted to be there for them. That thought alone made my eyes misty. So what if we were being too sentimental? In between my life in Japan and my life here, I had lived long enough to be a mushy old fart anyway. This suited me perfectly. In that case, to our friendship. Yes, to friendship. Cheers! We clinked our glasses, spilling alcohol everywhere. Oh, goody. Now everyone gets to see that moment. There we are. And moving on. And we're still, guys, we're still on this fucking page. We're still on this chapter. We're 233 out of 288 right now. We are 82% of the way through. This is all one goddamn chapter. But speaking of male friendship, what kinds of things do men even talk about in times like these? Cliff asked, puzzled. Raunchy, sexy stuff? I suggested. Sexy stuff? Ah, come to think of it, I heard you have a new wife now. I grinned. Yep, her name is Eris. She was actually a childhood friend. Lady Eris? Now that name brings back memory. Lady Eris? Now that brings back memories, said Zenobia, narrowing his eyes as he recalled our first meeting. I wondered how the woman once referred to as the Mad Dog had turned out. I shall be sure to pay my respects to her soon. Zenobia and Eris hadn't really spoken much in the Sharon kingdom, but I guess he still remembered her nonetheless. She was rather intense, so it would be hard to forget her. Huh. I paused. Wait a minute. Now that I think about it, Master Cliff, you knew about Eris before too, right? Didn't you say something about meeting her a long time ago? We had a brief interaction a long time ago, he mumbled. I don't feel anything for her now. Ah, so he'd had a small encounter with her years ago. Odds were she had completely forgotten he existed. That wouldn't be surprising, knowing Eris. The more important matter here is you, Rudius. I told you this before, but women aren't collectibles. Cliff launched into a long, drawn-out sermon. You can't just bring in a bunch of them to wait on you hand and foot. Once the three of us were sufficiently drunk, Zenoba was the one who launched into sexy talk. The conversation started about the wife that he'd married years before, but turned into a horror story midway before finally transitioning into a series of complaints about how she couldn't understand his dolls. Cliff and I joined in with anecdotes about Eris and Elinolise, but both were monsters in bed, so we could sympathize with one another's plight. Sadly, Zenoba quickly grew bored of this conversation, so we switched over to discussing my magic armor instead. When I began relaying the details of how I wore it in my fight with Orsted, the two of them listened eagerly, eyes alight with fascination. Apparently, giant robot versus super monster was a universally entertaining trope. In the course of this, I mentioned how Orsted had restored my missing arm. Without the prosthetic, I could fill up my wife's chest to my heart's content, but on the flip side, my strength had taken a serious hit. I could no longer do the same strenuous work that I could when I used the prosthetic arm. "We'll make another one right now," Cliff declared, reaching over to grab Zenoba and myself by the arm. Right now? Right now, Zenoba grunted. That's right. This restaurant should be closing soon. We can knock back a few drinks in my room while we work on creating a new prosthetic hand. Sounds good. Let's go, I agreed eagerly, leaping out of my chair. Zenoba chuckled. Ha ha ha. I suppose I have no other choice but to accompany you then. The three of us left the restaurant as they closed for the night. On the way back to Cliff's room, we stopped to buy some drinks. Elinolise, who should have been waiting at home, was nowhere to be seen when we arrived. We found a note saying she had left to visit my house. So at least there was no reason to worry. We carried our beverages into Cliff's study and began constructing a brand new prosthetic hand while nursing our drinks and babbling back and forth. I'm telling you, if you make it that light, it won't have any strength to it. Ah! See? It broke! That's why I keep telling you, it's got to be thicker, Cliff grumbled. Zenoba huffed. Nonsense! With Master's Earth Magic, we can do this, I swear to you. Okay, hand it over here then. I thrust out my hand. I'll show you what my magic can really do. Oh, how's this? Dummy, it's no different than it was a second ago, Cliff barked at me. Ha! Your eyes fail to see the truth. But I swear to you, it's twice as strong as it was before. Try it for yourself. It broke instantly. Whoops. In that case, let us revise our design, said Zenoba. As long as one can insert their fingers into it, that's good enough. So if we alter where the palm is supposed to be... Hey, Zenoba? Hold it just a moment, I interrupted. Oh, come, Master. Everyone fails. Come now, Master. Everyone fails sometimes. I shook my head. Let me try again. Just give me one more chance. Ha ha. All right. But this is the last. Making prosthetic hand was proving extremely difficult. Probably because we were all in a drunken stupor. Let's see. Where was I at? He's in the middle. Just a minute. Okay. No one had enough sense to make the right calls, so we were all getting too bold. Yet somehow our work was surprisingly precise, or at least I thought it was. Regardless, drinking with the boys and bantering while trying to make something turned out to be insanely fun. I was in high spirits. If another opportunity presents itself, I'd like to do this again, I thought to myself as we drank the night away. While the boys were busy getting hammered, shouting, "Ain't scared of no mama tonight!" Three pajama-clad girls sat on an enormous bed on the second floor of Rudius' estate. Today marks the 26th session of our regularly scheduled Grey Rat House meetings. Can we have a round of applause? Asked the white-haired girl. The blue-haired girl promptly clapped her hands. The red-haired girl sat with her legs folded under her, a serious expression on her face as she obeyed the command. One among them was old enough to not to be called a girl anymore, but if anyone said as much, the master of the house would roar in anger like a demon possessed. So everyone was careful to keep their mouths shut. As the master would argue, she looked young enough to be a middle schooler. So what was the problem with calling her a girl? Although a person from the master's previous world would be perfectly justified in pointing out that was precisely the problem. Digression aside, the red-haired girl Eris stared blankly at the other two in her company. She had been training in the yard when Sylphie dragged her inside this bedroom without explanation. She felt a bit lost. The white-haired girl, Sylphie, cleared her throat. She was wearing her usual soft two-piece pajama set, the kind Rudius liked. Ahem. Since Eris joined us recently, allow me to explain. I will take care of the explanation, the blue-haired girl Roxy interrupted. She had on a nightgown with an adorable design on it. Anyone who didn't know better would think it was made for a child. These meetings are something Sylphie came up with as a way for us to bond. We each have our own expectations and feelings of jealousy and possessiveness, but if we succumb to that and compete amongst ourselves, it will only hurt Rudy. As members of this household, our duty is to do all we can to make this a safe haven for him. Eris glanced down at her own attire. It was plain and casual. She inwardly swore that she wanted to go shopping tomorrow to find some proper pajamas. Eris, are you listening? Roxy asked. Yeah. Eris bobbed her head, but she was honestly still a bit confused, since she'd never imagined they'd held meetings like this. At any rate, Roxy said, is there anything you want to say to us? Please do so. If there's anything you want to say to us, please do so here. Let's try not to do any bickering in front of Rudy, especially since he's been so busy lately. We'd like to keep from adding to his burdens as much as we can. Got it, Eris nodded solemnly. No fighting inside the house, no causing trouble for Rudius. Eris was born in the Asura kingdom, and although her father Philip took only one wife, many houses in the kingdom had multiple wives. It was especially common in high-ranking noble houses who were eager to produce as many offspring as possible, since their line risked dying out otherwise. Even Eris's beloved grandfather had taken multiple partners. Eris recalled something her grandfather told her long ago. You can tell the caliber of a nobleman by how well his many wives get along with one another. The better the three of them got along, the more positively it would reflect on Rudius. With that out of the way, today's topic has to do with us. See, the two of us don't know you very well, Eris, and you don't know us very well either. That's why we'd like to take this opportunity to deepen our friendship. As Sylphie spoke, she reached under the bed and pulled out a bottle of strong liquor. That one could find just about anywhere. Roxy retrieved some cups and a tray of assorted snacks and placed them in the middle of the bed. Almost like a swordsman stabbing their blade into the ground, Sylphie set the bottle in the middle of their circle and declared, For today, we're just going to spill our guts, no holds barred. We'll each recount how we first met Rudius and what brought us to where we are now. In the process, we'll demonstrate how deep our feelings for Rudy are. Bring it on! Eris puffed out her chest. She was confident that her love for Rudius was second to none. In that case, I'll begin, said Sylphie. Rudius and I first met when he was still living in Buena Village. We were about 5 at the time. Thus began the girls' only gathering at Rudius's estate, a meeting which continued well into the night. Since Roxy was pregnant, she held off on the alcohol. Eris only got a little tipsy, perhaps due to a strong natural resistance. This meant Sylphie was the only one who got absolutely hammered. You know, Rudy was the first friend I ever made. I've loved him ever since. Oh, it brings back so many memories. He squeezed me in his arms back then, too. Didn't say a word, just put his arms around me like this and squeezed. The stench of booze was thickened Sylphie's breath as she latched onto Eris. Although Eris was a bit annoyed by Sylphie's clinginess, it didn't repulse her. She merely curled her lips, pouting, So what? Rudius hugged me when we were younger, too. Yeah, you already told us, Sophie whined. I'm so jealous. You got to be with Rudy during the best period of his life. You even got to be his first. How was it, by the way? Our first time together was incredible. It was no big deal. Eris huffed. Pretty normal, I guess. Besides, you've got to have his first kid and marry him first. I'm more jealous of that. The conversation was turning sour, which was why Roxy took the opportunity to cut in. Now, there's nothing wrong with not being his first. I haven't been his first for anything, but I'm still perfectly happy. Boo! Sylphie jeered. You'll get to talk, Roxy. You're his number one. You're the one he respects the most. Respect? I honestly don't understand why he seems to revere me so much. Rudy told him it's because you taught him the most precious thing in the world. Something really special. I bet it's something pervy. Something he's really into. Roxy shook her head. He was plenty perverted by the time I came along. I had nothing to teach him in those matters. When he was young, he even spied on me when I was showering. All I ever taught him was normal stuff. She fell into thought. Honestly, what did Rudius see in her? From what Roxy could remember, he'd been pretty attached to her from the start. But what could she have possibly taught him back then that was so special? Nothing stood out in her mind. Well, your special circumstance aside, even Eris has her own distinct charms. I'm really losing confidence over. Oh, your special circumstances aside, even Eris has her own distinct charms. I'm really losing confidence over here. Sophie hung her head. Distinct charms? What's that supposed to mean? Eris demanded. I mean, you know, you're strong, right? I'm jealous. You get to fight by Rudy's side. I worked hard to get where I am and have grown a lot, but I'll never compare to him. You saw it in the library labyrinth. Rudy's always trying to protect me. I appreciate that, but Sophie fidgeted in place, having drunk way more than she should have. Despite seeing how anxious the other woman was, Eris didn't let those words swell her own ego. She went to the sword sanctum precisely to train herself to be his equal. Her goal was to rival him in strength, and she had achieved that. She was confident she could beat him if he whipped out his magic in battle. That brought her great satisfaction, but she could only help feeling a little envious of the relationship between Sylphie and Rudius, especially because she was strong enough to protect herself and could never be the woman Rudius had to look out for. While Sylphie agonized over the issue, Roxy cocked her head, and Eris crossed her arms. Out of the blue, the door to the room swung open. Pardon me, mistresses. Oh, it's you, Miss Lilia, said Roxy. In walked a middle-aged woman in a maid outfit. Wisps of steam rose from a bowl of boiled potatoes and other assorted vegetables. I brought you an extra late-night snack, said Lilia. Roxy smiled. I apologize for inconveniencing you like this. Not at all, Lady Roxy. Looking after you and the other mistresses of the house are part of my duties as a maid. Roxy bowed her head in thanks, and Lilia dipped her chin in turn. Well, I am most humbled and deeply, thankful, Eris stammered, unused to using such polite turns of phrase. Not at all, Lady Eris. You needn't thank me. Now that you are one of Rudius's wives, that means I consider you my mistress as well. Eris was still struggling on how to interact with Lilia. Her family's estate in the Fatoa region had employed a number of maids, but Eris got the feeling she shouldn't treat Lilia the same way. She was the mother of Rudius's younger sister, after all. In a way, she was like a wet nurse or a second mother to him. The last thing Eris wanted was to make Rudius's mother hate her. Also, you needn't use such polite language with me. I heard much of you when I lived in Buena Village. What did you hear? Well, Lilia hesitated. Eris already knew it was nothing good if it was something Lilia had heard way back when she was still a child. I heard that you were so violent no one could get you under control, and that it would be difficult for you to ever live the life of a proper noblewoman. Eris scowled, sticking out her bottom lip. Despite the development in her sword skills, she wasn't so different now. There was a period where she tried her best to fulfill the role given to her, but she'd thrown all that away. But look at you. You have turned into a stunning young lady. The sword god. And even the Lord of the Fatoa region would be proud to see the woman you are now. I guess? Eris dropped her gaze. But my dad and grandpa are already. Ah, I apologize. Lilia's eyes filled with sadness and she lowered her head. It's fine, that disaster affected everyone. I'm not the only one who lost someone. Rudius's mom and dad were also. Silence fell in that brief exchange. The atmosphere in the room had turned gloomy. Steam continued to rise from the hot food Lilia had brought in. Uncomfortable with the change in mood, Sylphie piped up. Come to think of it, Miss Lilia, you've been with Rudy since infancy, right? After a pause, the maid answered, Yes, I was hired to be his wet nurse, after all. That means you knew him before Roxy and I ever met him. What was he like back then? As an infant? Lilia went quiet for a moment as she thought back. I must confess I found him a bit disturbing at first. Huh? Why? It's difficult to put into words. Lord Rudius was as elusive as a ghost. He'd disappear suddenly, and just when you thought you'd found him, he'd have this creepy grin on his face. Perhaps that's why. She smiled, remembering as she remembered the past. Why had she avoided Rudius so much back then, even though he was such an adorable child? Lilia remembered feeling disgusted by him, but she had forgotten those emotions with time, and all that remained were happy memories. But honestly, that's no different from how he is now, right? Yes, true, Lilia admitted. Back then, whenever I picked him up, he would have this lecherous grin on his face as he groped my chest. I don't think that has changed at all either, has it? Sylphie asked. Now that you mention it, no, it hasn't. Rudius had been a pervert from the moment he was born, apparently. Lilia's stories left an awkward air in the room, and yet there was one girl among them who snorted triumphantly. If he liked Lilia's chest that much, then he should be plenty happy with mine, Eris declared. She did indeed have an impressive bosom. I was kind of worried, actually. Sylphie and Roxy are so tiny, I thought maybe my body wasn't his type. Rudy isn't the type to judge a girl by her curves, Sylphie said, a tremor in her voice. Now that I think about it, while we were traveling together, he did stare at girls' chests all the time, Eris mumbled to herself. What? Even while you were traveling? Sylphie stroked her chin. Although now that I think about it, he did find every excuse to touch my chest right after we got married. On my days off, he'd spend the whole day doing that. He hasn't really touched mine that much. I wonder if he's just not interested in my chest. Roxy's shoulders sagged as she squeezed at her breast. Sadly, there wasn't much to grab. Well, at any rate, I should excuse myself, said Lilia. Sylphie called after her. Miss Lilia, you should drink with us. It couldn't hurt to do so occasionally. Roxy nodded. Yes, now that you mention it. I don't remember you drinking much while we were in Buena Village either. As you well know, I can't have any right now, but since you're already here, why don't you join us? But I have to look after Mistress Zenith. Then bring her along, too, said Sylphie. Eris nodded. Yeah, we're all adult women here. We can drink together. The one thing a drunkard didn't lack for was gusto, and these girls had that in spades right now. It took Sylphie no time at all to cajole Lilia into dragging Zenith into their drunken merrymaking. Elenalise was lonely that evening without Cliff. He had gone out earlier, insisting he had something to talk to Rudius about, man to man. Not wanting to dampen his pride, Elenalise wished him farewell, while lauding herself for being such a virtuous and forgiving wife. However, she quickly found herself bored with nothing to do. She and Cliff had been having sex regularly despite her swollen belly, but with him gone, there was no way for her to satisfy her carnal urges. In fact, she was pregnant. They were no worse than normal. In fact, since she was pregnant, they were no worse than normal. She figured she would be fine skipping a day, and so she left their abode to visit the Grey Rat residence in order to check in on Sylphie and Roxy. She arrived to find a group of 5 ladies throwing their own drinking party. Oh, dear me. Seems you girls are up to something fun. Ah, Grandma! Sylphie beamed. Your tummy sure has gotten big. Is my little brother in there? Or will I get a little sister? Oh, wait. If Cliff is basically my father, then that makes Rudy, When Elise walked in, Sylphie was in the midst of feeling up Eris's boobs from behind. For her part, Eris ignored Sylphie, eyes glued to the floor, or eyes glued to the food she was silently shoving into her mouth as she nursed her drink. Zenith was sitting nearby, acting as Eris's personal drink refiller. Beside her, Lilia was chugging away from her own mug, while Roxy topping off her glass whenever it grew empty. Miss Roxy, said Lilia, why is it that my daughter can't earn Lord Rudius's love as well? He does love her. Disappointed as she was that she couldn't join because of her pregnancy, Roxy still humored Lilia with an earnest response. I wonder if that's really true. Well, admittedly, he does only see her as a younger sister, Roxy said. But doesn't a woman's true happiness come from being loved by a man? Well, I definitely am happy, but I don't think that's the only form of happiness one can have. Besides, Aisha's a talented girl. I'm sure she will find a wonderful partner eventually. Lilia shot up straighter. Someone even better than Lord Rudius? Well, it would be difficult to find a man better than Rudy. When you put it like that, I really hit it big, didn't I? Like buying up a prime spot of land for pocket change before everyone realizes its value or the price shoots up. Watching them, Elise remembered how single girls from the Adventurers Guild would gather to throw parties. Those lamenting how they couldn't snag a good man would regularly meet up to get drunk and make merry before ultimately getting told off by the bartender and ending up on the streets after closing hour where they'd nod off until morning. Elise would eagerly join those girls from the Adventurers Guild when she could. She had nothing to fear. Unlike them, she never lacked for male partners. The only reason she participated was so she could enjoy some alcohol with a group of people. Rudius would weep if he could see you girls like this. The only time a girl is supposed to get this inebriated is in her partner's company, when it's just the two of them, she said. Oh, don't say stuff like that, Grandma, said Sylphie. Oh, hey, you're always teaching Roxy how to do stuff in bed, right? Why don't you teach me anything, huh? How come? Oh, Sylphie, honestly, you are completely wasted. But as for why I have never taught you anything, it's because Rudius will be more turned on by you if he thinks you're an innocent girl who doesn't know anything about sex. All the more reason for you to teach me all kinds of stuff. I'm tired of letting Rudy do whatever he wants to me in bed. It's about time I made him squeal for a change. It took only a few seconds for Elise to abandon all good sense on seeing her granddaughter drunk as a skunk. She was a good talker, which was precisely why she decided it best to join the girls by drinking alongside them. At any rate, Elise said, I'm going to get me a glass. She barely managed to grab an empty one before Sylphie's hand shot out to stop her. You can't! Girls with big tummies can't have alcohol. Tell that to Roxy. I don't gotta. Roxy isn't drinking, so there's no problem here. Plus, even if she did drink, she could use detoxification magic. So I don't gotta worry. A sober Sylphie would never have said something like that, but she was already 3 sheets to the wind. Elise sighed, exasperated, and found an empty chair to flounce into. You know, I learned how to use that magic too at the academy. Well, I can do it without chanting an incantation, Sylphie huffed. Yes, how incredible. I would expect no less from my granddaughter. That's why you can't drink. It's a no-no. Yes, I understand. Elise laughed off Sylphie's triumphant bragging and gave up on the idea of alcohol, opting to snack instead. It's not 'cause I'm your granddaughter. It's thanks to Rudy teaching me, said Sylphie. I do whatever he tells me to do, whether it comes to magic or sex, and it's because you're that kind of woman that you tempt him so, Elise pointing out. Yeah, he acts way more motivated the morning after we've slept together. It took Alinalise about an hour to catch up with Sylphie's high energy. That night, 4 of the women drank themselves into oblivion, guzzling down drinks as they let out all the negative feelings they'd built up, their anxiety around Rudius doing so many things in secret lately, their suspicions about the mad god and Orsted, and yet they were all optimistic that it would somehow work out. It was with that whirlwind of emotions that they knocked back their drinks and enjoyed themselves in drunken bliss. Roxy and Alinalise, who remained sober, were kind enough to humor the others in their numerous complaints until they eventually nodded off. It was they who cast detoxification magic on the others. While all was done at last, when all was done at last, Alinalise returned to her home while Roxy retreated to her room. The latter made preparations for school tomorrow before slipping into bed. There was only one girl in the household who couldn't participate in their little party, and sulkily slept the night away, but Roxy wouldn't even realize they'd left her out until the following morning. When my eyes cracked open, I found myself clinging to Zenoba. It should go without saying, but no homo. I only did this because I got totally smashed last night. That was some good alcohol we'd had. Honestly, I never got the point of drinking with a bunch of other men in my previous life, but it turned out that hanging out with a bunch of guys I liked made the alcohol taste that much better. My head is killing me. Since my head was pounding something fierce, I cast healing and detoxification magic on myself. The throbbing immediately receded. It was like taking a super-strength aspirin that kicked in immediately, washing away both the pain and its source. I did the same for Zenoba and Cliff, even though they were still sleeping like a couple of logs. The former had his foot resting on Cliff's face, which was probably why Cliff seemed to be having such a bad time sleeping. Sorry, buddy, but healing and detoxification magic can't take away the source of the stench. While my magic did an excellent job of easing the pain of a hangover, it didn't help with the dehydration. I decided to get a drink of water before my headache returned, using earth magic to conjure up a cup, then water magic to fill... I paused as I noticed something in the middle of the room. Whatever it was shaped like an arm, but numerous metal plates had been layered together, making it slightly larger and thicker than a normal arm, and unwieldy besides. What was this thing supposed to be again? I racked my brain, trying to recall happenings of the previous night. In fact, where the heck am I anyway? I scanned the room, but I didn't recognize my surroundings. I was pretty sure that I had been here before, and I could tell it was Cliff's room at least, but other than that... let's see. I think we drank a bunch at the restaurant. Oh yeah, we got on the topic of remaking my prosthetic hand. Cliff said we had the materials here to draw magic circles for it, so that's why we came here to this place. That was where my recollection ended. Everything after that was murky. Judging by the evidence, we guzzled alcohol while working on making this new version of the prosthetic. Fuzzy as my brain was on the details, I did remember bits and pieces about our attempts not going to plan at all. I reached down and picked up the prosthetic, or gauntlet rather, and inspected it. The thing was heavy, probably weighed at least 10 kilograms, which meant I'd made it with my earth magic. I had even left a perfect slot in the palm where a magic stone can be embedded. It struggled to fit on my hand while holding it, so I let it down and slipped my hand in. It fit like a glove. Earth, be thou my hand, I muttered. Mana started pooling into my arm, feeding into the gauntlet, and gradually it became lighter and lighter. My sense of touch was less sensitive when wearing it, but I could easily pick up whatever I wanted, giving me fond nostalgia for the time I spent with my prosthetic. There was no mistaking it. This was a Zayleaf prosthesis, or the Zayleaf gauntlet, rather, if we were going for a more accurate term. We actually finished it. Indeed, we had successfully created a Zayleaf gauntlet. And after that, the three of us groggily sat around and enjoyed the breakfast Alinalise made. She had come home at some early hour this morning. We did it. Yeah. Let's be sure to inscribe a clean blueprint for later. While we celebrated the completion of the gauntlet, we lacked the energy to show much enthusiasm. No amount of healing or detoxification magic, could restore the hours of sleep lost to partying till the wee hours. Well, see you. Yep, let's drink again sometime. Indeed, it was a pleasure. We bid our quiet, reserved goodbyes, promising to do this again. My feet dragged as I made my way home. It was already almost noon. The sun beat down on me. The summer heat was inescapable. This also meant the snow was long gone, and soon enough the beast folk would enter mating season. Personally, I was eager to mate year round, so the seasons didn't have much of an impact on me, but seeing how antsy everyone else was made me restless as well. Roxy's belly had begun to swell. I was looking forward to deciding on a name for our baby, but in just 2 weeks, I would have to leave with Ariel for Osira Kingdom. I could instantly return home with teleportation magic, but we had no idea how many months we would be spending there. I hated the idea that I wouldn't be there for the birth. After all, by the time Roxy went into labor, she would have spent over 9 months with uncomfortable pregnancy symptoms, all so she could give birth to my child. There was little I could do for her in return, but I needed to show how grateful I was through my actions at least. I wonder if it'll be a girl or a boy. Since Lucy was a girl, I kind of wanted a boy this time, but honestly, it didn't matter either way. Come to think of it, Eris mentioned she wants to have a boy. Back in Japan, there were tips and tricks for determining the sex of your baby, but what were they again? Like, if you did thing A, it would be easier to have a boy, and if you did thing B, it would be easier to have a girl, or something like that. I recalled vinegar being used at some point, too. I wonder if you could change a baby's sex through magic in this world. Well, it didn't matter either way. We would lovingly raise our baby regardless of their sex. Eris would likely also wind up pregnant in no time. My concern with her was whether or not she would settle down and behave while pregnant. On top of that, she seemed to be in a rush to have a baby. In the middle of intimacy, she would pause numerous times and ask, "Can I get pregnant this way?" Or, "Are you sure this is right?" Part of it was because she naturally had a high libido, but maybe part of it was that she felt a step behind the other girls. Since Sylphie had already had Lucy and Roxy was currently pregnant, in Osira Kingdom there was a strong sense that one couldn't openly declare themselves a man's wife until they had their child. I had no idea what Eris thought about it, but if she wanted to have a baby quickly, she could feel more secure. I would oblige her. Oh, so she could feel more secure, I would oblige her. Finally, I saw my house in the distance. Since I hadn't told the girls I would be staying out for the night, I figured they would probably be upset with me. Not that our household was strict about that kind of stuff. Perhaps it would be wise to make a concrete rule regarding curfew and staying out. Kidnappings were a common problem in this world, and there was no telling what the man god might do. Lucy was growing up, so making a rule now would serve to protect her and our other future children. "I'm home," I declared as I walked in. "Oh, big brother, welcome home," Aisha said. I saw neither hair nor hide of the rest of my family. "Huh? Where is everyone? Did they all go out?" "They were up late into the night," Aisha explained. "They're still asleep." "What, they were partying it up? Without little old me? Does that mean I was left out of all the fun?" In other words, while I was out knocking back drinks with the boys, the girls had a celebration of their own. I could only hope they hadn't spent the entire time bad-mouthing me. "Can you believe them? They were so cold to me," Aisha groused. "While I was sleeping, they got together to have drinks and chat." "Oh, so you weren't part of the festivities?" "Nope. Leo and I slept together the whole night. Speaking of Leo, when I woke up this morning, I noticed the bed felt cold and wet. Leo apparently had an accident. I got onto him and he looked all dejected. He may look like a big dog, but he's still just a little pup." Aisha sure seems to be enjoying her days here. "So, what did you do? Did you wash the bedding?" I asked. "Of course I did. Oh, and Miss Eris helped me out. She promised she wouldn't tell anyone since she used to wet the bed as well. I told her it wasn't me, but she wouldn't believe me no matter what I said. Please tell her the truth. I swear I have never once wet the bed since I was born." "I don't know. Are you sure about that?" I teased. Not you too. You guys are cruel." We moved to the living room as we bantered. I wondered if Eris took part in this drinking party. It left me a little anxious, but it was good she seemed to be getting along with the other girls. Huh, Rudius, welcome home. As I was lost in thought, Eris came down the stairs. She was wearing light, flexible clothing and carrying a wooden sword, even though her real weapon still rested on her hips. Good to be home, I said. Going out for training now? Yep, I have to train even harder. I had no idea what they had discussed during the party, but she seemed to be in high spirits. Which reminds me, I have a favor to ask of her. Eris? What? Perhaps it was thanks to the sun on the walk back, but my head was clearer than before, and my body felt lighter, too. All I needed was another glass of water, and I'd be good to go. One big glass. And while I was in the mood, it was the perfect time to ask. If you're going to do some training, how about having a mock battle with me? You know, like you and Regard used to do while we were traveling together. Haven't done that for a long time. For a moment, she stared vacantly at me, but she soon recovered and flashed a grin. Sounds good. I'll pound you into the ground like I used to. Oh, well, I'll try my best to keep up. Since this was a mock battle, I hoped she'd at least hold enough back to not kill me. This is going to be okay, right? Right? I mean, she is a Sword King now, so she can hold herself back. Right? With that promise made, I left to change clothes. Eris had become quite the badass since I last saw her, and I couldn't let myself look too pathetic in front of her. Time to get my game face on. The two of us stood apart, facing one another. It's been a really long time since I sparred with you like this, said Eris. Sure has. How many years has it been since we traveled with Regard? About 5, if my approximation was correct. I won't lose to you anymore, Eris bellowed. Don't worry, I don't have any illusions about being able to win. I used to defeat her after I received my Eye of Foresight, but by the end of our journey, the advantage that gave me was negligible at best. The two of us had gone on to live different lives after we parted. Eris had spent all her time studying the sword, doing nothing but fighting. Having seen her face off with Orsted, I could already tell I didn't stand a chance of beating her. That said, you don't have much experience fighting a mage, do you? I asked. Nope. And I've never faced off with anyone skilled enough to use something like the Sword of Light. Mock battles like these will help us prepare to face off against opponents of similar skill level. Eris huffed, grinning from ear to ear. What's with her? I didn't really compliment her that much. Did I say something funny? It really has been forever since we did this too, she said. Yeah, I guess so. Eris wasn't just referring to the sparring. She was recalling when I was her tutor and used to logically analyze what we were doing as we trained. Well, with that out of the way, it's time to battle, just like before when we were traveling. Yep, got it. She lifted her wooden sword, holding it high above her head, her favorite pose since childhood. However, things were different now. The moment she took that pose, the air around her settled. The tense, cocky aura about her disappeared in an instant. Panicked, I dropped into a fighting stance and gripped my staff, unleashing my Eye of Foresight. Before I could even get the word out, Eris' figure blurred. By the time I finished the sentence, a force struck my right shoulder. I dropped my staff before I could register what had happened and went sprawling. The next thing I knew, I was staring at the sky. There was a delay before the pain hit, shooting through my shoulder. I couldn't move my right arm at all, which made me suspect she'd shattered my shoulder blade. I managed to reach my left hand over and started chanting, "Let this divine power be a satisfying nourishment, giving one who lost their strength the strength to rise again. Healing!" Slowly, the pain subsided. Eris appeared in my field of vision, still holding her sword above her head with a confused look on her face, as if to say, "What now? Can I strike you again?" "Hold it! Stop! I give!" I thrust my hand out to stay her, and she finally lowered her weapon. I took a breath and lifted myself off the ground. "Eris, was that the Sword of Light just now?" "Yep." "Aha! So that's the secret technique of the Sword God style. I had seen it once before, and Orsted had even hit me with the technique, but Seeing it once again reinforced how ungodly fast it was. I hadn't had time to blink, let alone react. So that's what it was, I mumbled. Amazing, I didn't even see it coming. Right? Put everything I had into it. Eris nodded, pleased by my compliment. Guess I'll have to work hard and find a way to counter it. Alright, so we get another picture. There we go. Eris huffed. It won't be that easy. Yeah, I don't expect I'll be able to do it today. Still, I couldn't look like a complete loser in front of her. I needed to make sure she could learn something from these mock battles. Well, to sum up the results of our battles, I lost miserably. Eris won 9 out of 10 of our matches. I frowned. I already knew Eris was strong. In fact, I'd already figured I would be no match for her before we started. The point of these mock battles was not for me to win, but to get stronger. Experiencing the best of the sword god style was a valuable lesson in itself. Yet as much as I appreciated that, I couldn't help feeling utterly dejected after having the snot kicked out of me again and again. I really did try everything. Quagmire, Deep Mist, Earth Fortress, Vacuum Wave, and Sonic Boom. I even tried using wind and sand to obscure her vision. I thought getting cornered would be her weakness, and it certainly was, but her Sword of Light was so fast, it would overcome that. Even if we managed to strike each other at the same time, I still lost, though I thought electric would be enough to knock us both out of the fight, but Eris kept a firm grip on her sword, even as it shot through her, and kept charging at me. She didn't lack guts for sure. Meanwhile, all it took was one hit and I was out of the game. The ridiculous gap between her stamina and mine made me worry whether she'd feel disillusioned after all this. I really am a loser, aren't I? I sighed. Why do you think that? I mean, look at you. You worked hard and became this powerful as a result. Well, this is all my efforts have amounted to. I feel like I can't look you in the eye, especially with how many hours of training you put in compared to me. The one time I managed to snatch a win was when I managed to stop her with my Zalif gauntlet. Eris was thrown off by the abnormal resistance, and she felt through my sleeve, with her, which left her gaping in surprise. I couldn't blame her. She thought it would break my arm, and she thought she would break my arm with her swing, only to be met with steel that deflected her attack. The Zalif gauntlet had a sleeker design than its predecessor, though the two weighed about the same. Without thinking, Eris had blurted, "What? So you can make your arm hard too?" The sexual implications had also made her cheeks flush brightly. Alas, there was only one part of my body I could harden like that, and it generally remained flaccid until nighttime. In any case, I might have won, but it wasn't because of my strength. Luck had favored me, and the same tactic wouldn't work twice. If she'd used a real sword instead of a wooden one, there was a good chance she would have lopped off my hand along with the gauntlet. As far as I was concerned, that win didn't count. My win rate then was 0%. Yep, just call me Big Loser Rudius. Hi, I hear you. All right, let's see if anybody is watching while mining out a massive iron vein. There you go. I'm trying to see if anybody has donated. Oh, there's a lot of half sister. Okay. I'm trying to see if anybody has donated 500 biddies to feed you. I'm just trying to see if anybody's Toby. I'm just trying to see if anybody's bidded to feed you. Okay. It does not. Well, Toby pets were redeemed. There we go. Get some Toby pets going. Some Toby pets. I know you want Toby treats, but Toby treats have not been redeemed. All right. Oh man, how many more pages do I have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, 10. I have 10 to go. 96%. Okay. So, and I'm at 92. So there you go. Woot woot. All right, back to it. That's not true at all, Eris said. We're talking swordplay versus magic here. In melee combat, it's only natural you'd lose. Okay, so I've gone about 61 pages so far. Jesus. Honestly, that was not the reaction I expected. In my mind, I had only imagined two scenarios. In one, she would sniff, puff out her chest, and say, "Of course, because I'm stronger." And then she would lose her temper and snap, "Rudius, you need to train harder." In the other, she would sigh, be disgusted, and say, "You bore me." Her response was so different that I was left gawking. Seriously, did I just hear the word melee come out of Eris's mouth? We start within my preferred attack range, so you're at a disadvantage from the beginning. In fact, I'm the one who should be ashamed that you won even once, Eris said, all of that with a completely earnest look on her face. Am I hearing things? Is this really my Eris? Let's see. New. Okay. No. Stop it. Okay. I had to remind myself that she was a sword king now. Of course she would be knowledgeable about combat. It would be odd if she wasn't. She had spoken this analytically when she taught Norn's swordsmanship too. I knew that, and yet I couldn't stop myself from asking. Eris, I have one question. What? Who, taught you all that? Was it the Sword King, a Sword Emperor? I suspected it was one of those two. I wasn't really asking because I wanted to know who specifically taught her. Maybe I just wanted to reassure myself by confirming that she hadn't come up with all that on her own. If that's the case, I'm a hateful bastard. But I couldn't really help it. On the outside, it looked as though she hadn't changed at all, but so much about her was different, and it left me a little, well, gobsmacked. Albert was the one who taught me about melee, Eris declared. Ah, as I figured, someone did teach her, but the name Albert gave me pause. I was pretty sure I'd heard it before somewhere. Wait, the North Emperor? North Emperor Albert? That's the one. From what I understand, you were the sword god's apprentice, but you're saying you also learned from the North Emperor? And a bit from the water god, too, yeah. Water god Rada, too, huh? Of course, it wasn't surprising that she would pick up on other swordplay styles in the Sword Sanctum. It was in Place's very name, or maybe those warriors had happened to swing by and she had received unofficial lessons from them that way. Regardless, North Emperor Albert and Water God Rada were big names. Orsted mentioned there was a good chance we would be fighting those two in Osira, and lo and behold, they were the ones who taught Eris all she knew. I wondered if this was a trap. I wanted to believe it was a simple coincidence, but Eris, to tell you the truth, there's a good chance we might be facing those two when we go to Osira. Really? Yeah, they're on the enemy side. I thought that even Eris would find it difficult to face her former teachers. I tried to word it diplomatically, but she simply crossed her arms and grinned like she was ready to walk into battle. Yeah? That gets me itching to fight. Pardon me. She looked like she would gladly throw down with them right here and now. Apparently, she hadn't built the same kind of relationship with them as the one she had with Ghislaine. In fact, I wondered if she'd even made any friends at the Sword Sanctum. It worried me. Well, if you're raring to go, then I won't hold back when fighting them either. Of course! You better not hold anything back with them, she said. I stared at her. Because you think it would be disrespectful? Because they'll cut you in two in an instant. Her expression made it clear she wasn't kidding. But don't worry, you have me to protect you. Right. Reassuring as that should have been, being told they'd cut me in two was honestly terrifying. I definitely didn't want to face them head on. Maybe we could lure them into a trap or rig things so the conditions favored us. I'd have to bank on that. Well, thank you for doing this mock battle with me regardless. No need to thank me. As your wife, it's my duty. Oh, goodness. You're going to make me blush. Well then, as your husband, I'd better work hard so I can stand toe-to-toe with you, I said. You're fine as you are. You sure? Yeah, everyone has their own role to play. In fact, if I know you have my back in battle, it'll put me at ease. Huh. 5 years ago, Eris would never have said something like that. The skills she had picked up during the time she spent training were certainly the most notable thing, but she had matured mentally as well. I am really going to have to work hard if she doesn't feel so she doesn't feel disillusioned by me. Dude, there is no way she's going to feel disillusioned by you, especially after chasing after you for so long. You are literally the driving force behind everything, and it's because she's been around you for so long. I continued sparring with Eris as I made preparations for our departure. That included making improvements to my magic armor, working on a way to combat Orsted's curse as well as packing for the trip. I did all of this while trying to spend more time with Roxy. Of course, I wasn't with her all the time. I had several meetings with Orsted where we discussed what abilities North Emperor Owlbear and Water God Rada might use, as well as how to counter them. We also worked out how to contact the band of thieves Triss was involved with. Just to be on the safe side, I brushed up on my geographical knowledge of Osira's capital, Ars, as well as the layout of the Silver Palace, where the royals resided. I also introduced Cliff and Orsted so the former could begin studying Orsted's curse. I was pulling out all the stops to do whatever I could, all while trying to set aside extra time to spend with Roxy. I wasn't stalking her, to be clear. Yeah, maybe I loitered in front of her door sometimes and snuck into her peripheral vision to get her attention, but most of the time I was pretty direct in asking for her time. Perhaps because she was pregnant, she was more willing than usual to accept my company. Not that she ever refused it before, of course, but she was making a more concerted effort to approach me. It warmed my heart. She had always been a little aloof with me. If I was sitting on the couch, she would opt for one of the armchairs or take the seat directly across from me rather than settle in beside me. That had changed as of late. She would either cozy up beside me or plop herself in my lap. Can you believe that? In my lap! This was the same Roxy that hated being treated like a kid. But she was willing to perch herself on my legs. If that wasn't enough, her cheeks would light up, as if she was embarrassed to be doing it. No doubt it took more courage to do this than simply take a seat by my side. That was why I made sure to offer prayers of gratitude to my altar every night. My goddess, thank you for letting me have such a happy life. One evening, Roxy and I found ourselves sitting on the living room couch side by side. We would often sit together and chat like this as the day drew to a close. We never ran out of things to talk about. Roxy would discuss how things were at school or news about the latest magical implements. Oh, hang on, I just realized something. I need to go back to studio mode. YouTube group, turn the Twitch group on. There we go. Okay, and turn studio mode back off. That way, when people follow on Twitch, I get that notification. All right. None of the subjects were terribly important, but chatting with her always put me at ease. Hearing her voice alone was enough to make me happy. Roxy's words always carried deep nuance, filled with wisdom and enlightenment. I never spent a dull minute with her. You're being too insecure, said Roxy. While a mage should keep their distance while attacking, if they get too far away, that means a greater delay before their attack hits. Alrighty. But when I'm fighting some of those swords, shouldn't I put some distance between myself and them? The subject of today's discussion was my match with Eris. Most people would judge me, saying it was wrong to bring up another woman when I was spending time with Roxy, but it was actually Roxy who broached the subject. She had watched our match, watched me get my butt handed to me. Roxy agreed. True, if you're a magician facing a swordsman, the more distance you can get, the better position you'll be in. Your spell's impact may be delayed, but at least your opponent's attacks won't hit you either. See, like I was saying, however, that all changes the moment you enter your opponent's attack range. My shoulders slumped. Really? Once you're within their reach, they have the complete upper hand. After all, they're fast. Trying to put distance between yourself and them at that point is futile. You won't be able to move fast enough to get out of their range. They're going to come straight for you if you try that, and their attacks are like cone-shaped wave that comes outward, meaning you're more likely to get hit by the Meaning you're more likely to get hit by them the further you move away. Yeah, I figured. I had experienced that numerous times in my practice battles against Eris. She usually charged at me as she attacked, but she also often kept me barely within range. From that position, she could counter any magic I tried and sling at her. Tried to sling at her, and if I tried to fall back, she would chase me down. I had lost almost 30 times before realizing she was doing. Allow me to quiz you. When you are up against an opponent whose area of attack is in front of them, where is the most advantageous position on the field? Behind the enemy? I guessed. Roxy nodded. Precisely. They're going to lunge forward with their attack, so the center of balance is going to be tilted forward. Even if they try to defend their rear with an attack, it still will be severely reduced. If you can withstand that, you'll have a chance to counter them. Thus, the key is to slip out of their attack range and flank them. Makes sense. So it was better to charge forward instead of falling back. The most dangerous move was actually the best path to survival. Roxy's brilliance didn't surprise me. She wasn't my teacher for nothing. And as an adventurer, she had probably seen her fair share of such situations. She'd probably taken down a number of powerful demon-like beasts at close range. Calling her a god was no exaggeration. My eyes sparkled as I stared at my wife, and she awkwardly averted her gaze. Ahem. Well, I'm sure it would be difficult with Eris as your opponent. I certainly couldn't do it. So please don't ask me to demonstrate for you. No, I'm certain that if anyone could do it, you could, I gushed. No, I really couldn't. Stop looking at me like you think I'm some kind of invincible superhuman. I'm not looking at you like that. My eyes are just sparkling because you're a goddess. Idiot, same thing. Regardless, I finally had my answer. I shouldn't try to escape my opponent by falling back every time. I needed to charge forward at least occasionally, get the drop on my opponent, and halt their momentum with a counter of my own. That would force them to second-guess themselves, to make them doubt their usual method of charging in for the kill, and give me the advantage instead. If I could make them think it was a risk to close too much distance between us, that would actually make it so I could fall back and gain the upper hand. Granted, it wouldn't be that simple with Eris. I would just have to keep losing to her while cautiously testing my options. Ahem. Roxy cleared her throat, interrupting my thoughts. Well, Rudy, since your departure is fast approaching, I think it's about time you decided on a name for the baby. Isn't thinking up a baby's name before going off on an adventure kind of an ill omen? I said. There's a superstition born of a human hero's story, right? It has nothing to do with a meagered tribe. Oh, I'm sorry. That's a superstition is what I meant. Okay. Oof, she'd rejected that outright. But an ill omen was still an ill omen. Still, if my goddess said it was nothing to worry about, there was no need to buy into the superstition. I would do as my goddess bid me. In our village, it's the tribe's leader's job to pick the name, said Roxy. And you're the leader of our household, right? So hurry up and make your decision. Are you sure you want me to make that choice all on my own? Of course. While you're gone, I'll be lovingly stroking my belly and calling our baby by whatever name you give it. That will bring me some happiness in your absence. As she spoke, she caressed her stomach. I cupped my hand over hers and followed her motions. It was strange, thinking how this girl I had known for over a decade now, held my baby within her. I'd experienced this same puzzling sensation before with Sylphie, and now I was again with Roxy. Happiness swelled in the depths of my chest. It was such a pleasant feeling, one I wanted to enjoy again and again. Heh, I snickered. What is it, Rudy? That laugh sounds just like Sylphie. Just like Sylphie, huh? Nothing really, thinking about how much I like your tummy. It's not as slender as Sylphie, nor as fit and muscular as Eris. But if you still like my body, then you're welcome to touch it as much as you want. Really? I asked, although I'd already been doing just that for the past few minutes. Half of the baby inside me belongs to you, after all. What about you? How much of you belongs to me? Roxy paused before saying, Everything, at least on the outside. But I can't claim the baby inside, too? She shook her head. Half of the baby belongs to me. I won't budge on that. Makes sense. I knew she was wise, that's right. A child belongs to both of its parents, and Roxy belongs to me. Let's see, what should we do about the name? I mumbled. Well, a Megurdian name would be something like Lola? The Megurd sure seemed to like names that started with Ro or Lo, but since our child was only half Megurdian, there was no reason we had to stick to that tradition. I think it would be best if we took something from our names, Rudius and Roxy, and combined them, I said. That's a good idea. Then Rodius or Luxy? I don't think our names pair up well. Nonsense, I insisted. We are a perfect match for one another. We couldn't simply slap our names together like that. Though maybe we could change a vowel. Start the name off with, say, Ray or Lay instead. Ray. Oh, crap. That sounded just like Old Man Ray from Tensei Bakaban. I could imagine our child humming Ray to themselves as they swept the floor with their bamboo broom. There was nothing wrong with wanting things clean, but that was definitely not what we needed right now. I liked the sound of the name that Roxy recommended a moment ago, Lola. It made me picture a young woman who is anxious to experience the feverish passion of love, but that wouldn't work either. I wanted something more Roxy-like, something that sounded wise and yet endearing at the same time. I loved the way she turned when I called her name and how she peered up at me, wearing a perfect poker face as she asked, "Yes, what do you need?" And that was exactly the kind of name I wanted for our child. La, li, lu, le, lo. Which one of them would be best fitting for her baby? I got it. If it's a boy, we'll call him Loro. If it's a girl, we'll call her Lara. How's that? I proposed. A fine idea. Loro and Lara. I like the sound of those names. Of course you do. I practically ripped those names straight out of The Adventures of Lolo and... The Adventures of Lolo, after all. With some slight alteration. Doesn't that make you happy, Loro or Lara? Your father was kind enough to decide on a name for you. Despite having the appearance of a middle schooler, the expression Roxy wore as she cooed at her stomach was like that of the Holy Mother. Divine. She's utterly divine. Which means our baby will be the goddess's child. Rudy, Roxy said, interrupting my thoughts. Yes? I know I acted like I wasn't worried at all a few days ago, but I expect you to come home safe and sound, okay? I want both of us to be able to hold this child together. Yes, ma'am. She didn't have to tell me twice. Those indulgent days passed by quickly, and soon enough we had to depart for the kingdom. There were 8 of us in the party. Ariel's group consisted of Luke, Sylphie, Elamoy, and Clean. There was Eris, Ghislaine, and me. Then there was Eris, Ghislaine, and me. We had a single carriage, which required 2 of our 5 horses to pull it. Ariel's trappings were rather modest for the second princess of a country as great as Asura. To the outside world, it would look like we were gearing up to sneak into the country. In reality, we planned to access a forbidden teleportation circle to transport ourselves in. Despite the secretive nature of our mission, there was a whole crowd at the entrance of the city waiting to see us off. This group included the vice principal, officers of the student council, the general manager of the Magicians Guild, the leader of the magical implement workshop, and a handful of other heads of organizations, along with representatives for nobility and royalty from the 3 magic nations. They all swooped in, one after the other, to bid Ariel farewell. These guys don't understand the definition of covert, do they? Just because you're not throwing a party doesn't mean it's okay to gather en masse. Well, regardless, their presence here was proof that Ariel's efforts to make connections in Renoa had bore fruit. Perhaps a day would come when I would need to make use of those connections myself. Orsted was insanely powerful, but he didn't have very good relations with others. I was on my own on that front. I decided to mingle with the others and pay my respects to them. And thus, we set off for Asura Kingdom. Holy shit! Finally we are done with that chapter. Alright, I'm gonna pee, and then once I get back, we'll talk about it. 74 pages practically. Jesus. Stay. Stay. You're staying. You are a string puppy today. Okay. Sorry about that. Holy cow. Yeah, that was that. Now you guys understand why it is that I did the this chapter by itself, because holy shit, that was a lot to go through. All right. We've still got a short bit of reading to go. We've got 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11 pages left. And that's the end of the book in 11 pages. And this next one is about Ghislaine. So that's going to be neat. No causing trouble. With the boys, I also had this gripe. I was malding like hell. Okay, so welcome back to the chat room. Kind of scared. Okay, so we're done. So that's where I left off. Okay, so that's moderator stuff. Okay, because she's his sister. Yeah, half sister, but still, I fucking love drunk Sylphie. Yeah, she is funny. Lilian's technique won't help you, sweetie. You need the libido of an Osran noble to compete. You're not wrong. You're not freaking wrong. Also, Space Frog. Holy shit. All that stuff. That's quite a bit, said Moist Master. Okay, yeah, that is. But that's okay. It's supposed to be that way. The gap of Sylphie being a serious, cold-hearted killer who's really cautious. Sober, casual Sylphie who is happier but still serious. And drunk Sylphie who's just adorable. All right. So watching while mining out on a massive iron vein. Well, there you go. At least you found a bunch of iron. Let's see. Minecraft also. Okay, Rickalicious doing the Minecraft. Good chapter. Yeah, Rimuruism. Fenris. Rimuruism, I think, is just merely praise Rimuru. I don't think we have an actual thing. Also, we're not redeeming voices. The full Sylphie gap was amazing. I hope I played that well for you guys. Did you guys have fun with how I performed that scene? I tried my best to do kind of a not a full sloshed not a full sloshed Sylphie, but like mostly sloshed, but like not slurring words, but you could definitely tell out of character for Sylphie. Toby, you've been waiting so patiently. Come here. Come here. Come here. Come. You have to come up. Come on. Up. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Yeah. Yeah. Come on. Good boy. Good boy. Ah. You grab it and you jump off. You cheeky little belt. You cheeky little shit. Sure, it sounded good. Oh, thanks. All that encouragement, I appreciate it. Sure, it sounded good. Ah, man. How you doing? Come here. Come here. You got treats because you've been so patient. Yes. Yes. Okay. Go sit down. Go lie down. I've got a little bit left and then we'll get to it. You can make our doggo fat, indeed. All right. So, as far as requests go, all right. 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. One. Okay. 44 minutes ago. Okay, we've got more than just 10, right? Two, three. Okay, Rage sent me a bunch, but they're not all. Okay, so what in the world? It says, okay. Oh, okay, there we go. 30, 30, 30, 30, 50, 30. Okay, so 50 squats and 30 of everything else is what I'm looking at right now. So that's what we've got so far. We've got this last little bit to go through. And then once we're done here, we can, I will finish up, get your thoughts on all of this. And, God, so close, so close. Been 2.5 hours for one chapter. That's how big that chapter was, guys. So here we go. Extra chapter, The Black Wolf Sword King. Ghislaine Didoldia's mornings began before the sun came up. She would change into the day's clothes, chug a glass of water, do some basic stretches, then leave the inn where she was staying. She'd spend the next hour walking around the city. It was quiet in the early mornings, but that didn't mean no one was up and about. People clustered behind large company buildings in front of the Adventurers Guild and at the city's entrance, where they sleepily bustled about. Ghislaine approached the city entrance as a team of adventurers was returning from a mission. They were a large group numbering over 20, most likely a famous clan. Behind them, a brawny horse pulled a large wagon housing an enormous bovine creature. This beast was a likely sudden mutation that appeared on the outskirts of the city, and this famous clan had accepted the quest to take care of it. Their faces were heavy with exhaustion, which suggested the mission had taken them days to complete. Ghislaine watched them for a while, then finally lost interest and turned to leave. After her walk, she returned to the inn, where she practiced with her sword in the courtyard. It was a simple exercise. All she did was swing her weapon over and over. She had done the same monotonous routine daily without fail for over a decade. Sword god Galfalion had ordered her to do this ages ago. She did it while she was at Sword Sanctum. She did it when she became an adventurer. She did it even after Eris and Soros took her in and she became a bodyguard, an instructor in swordplay. She did it when she was teleported to the conflict zone during the displacement incident, as well as when she made it to the refugee camp in the Fatoa region, where she helped Alphonse out. She continued doing it even after she returned with Eris and reunited with Eris and returned to the Sword Sanctum. Even now, as Ariel's bodyguard, she never skipped a lesson. The training gave her a sense of her physical condition and mental state each day. Lately, her mind had been at peace. She'd had 2 objectives to fulfill: protect Eris and avenge Soros. Now one of them was complete. She had safely delivered Eris back to Rudius. That mission was over. The only one thing was left. Just one. Ghislaine liked that. Having one goal was straightforward. It was easy to understand, and she didn't have to strain herself over it. Even better, her path was already laid out before her. Rudius had introduced her to Ariel, who understood what Ghislaine wanted to accomplish, and she had promised to let Ghislaine do just that. Finally, everything was simple. All she had to do when the time came was charge forward and cut her enemy down. This simplicity was why she felt so relaxed lately. That night, Ghislaine visited one of the Sharia's many pubs. Clamor filled the air, and yet it was conspicuously quiet in her immediate vicinity. Despite being past her prime, Ghislaine was still a beauty, a beast woman with tanned skin and impressive musculature, and yet no one tried to approach her. The dangerous aura she exuded reminded the people of the Berserker Sword King, who was the subject of endless rumors. The Berserker Sword King, a person who swung their fist indiscriminately and cut people down, a person who lacked all reason and never thought twice before unleashing their fury. Just meeting their gaze could provoke them into a fight, and they were an amazing sword fighter on top of all that. The mystery surrounding them only stoked more fear, which was why everyone gave Ghislaine a wide berth. In truth, though, Ghislaine was the teacher of this rumored Berserker Sword King. She was not the woman herself. She sat in a seat by the counter, keeping to herself, quieter than any of the other customers as she nursed her drink. That made her even more intimidating, adding weight to the rumors. Of course, Ghislaine wasn't intentionally trying to be menacing. She was only waiting for her food to come. Ghislaine knew that this place had procured the meat of the beast those adventurers brought this morning, which meant she would be serving up they would be serving up thick slices of juicy steak. That was why her gaze was glued to the kitchen, from which the scent of sizzling meat wafted out to tease her. She waited eagerly, salivating at the thought. The door suddenly swung open and a chime sounded to announce the arrival of a new guest. An elf with gorgeous hair and a beautiful face and generous breasts strolled in. Her stomach, however, was so swollen it looked bizarre on her otherwise slender figure, a clear sign she was pregnant. As soon as other people in the pub spotted her, their faces lit up and they eagerly called out to her. "Hey, it's been a while. Not looking for any male partners anymore? Come to think of it, you got hitched, didn't you? Come on, grab a seat. Let's knock back some drinks together." The elf woman masterfully rebuffed their invitations, instead heading deeper into the pub, straight for the innermost seat along the counter. There, she took up a spot beside the one person everyone else had been avoiding like the plague. They all watched her and gulped nervously. "Hey, Ghislaine. Sorry to keep you waiting," Elenily said in a sing-song voice as she turned to the beast woman. "You're late," Ghislaine grunted. "Well, I can't help that. After all, Wait!" Ghislaine's sharp voice rang out, cutting Elenilys off mid-sentence. Shocked, Elenilys froze. The proprietor appeared from the kitchen, carrying an enormous wooden plate. He headed straight over to them and slammed the meal down in front of them. "Is this what you wanted?" There was an iron plate over the wood, on top of which sat a sizzling steak with steam rising off. It came with a side of grilled potatoes and assorted vegetables that only further taunted her growling belly. "Yep," Ghislaine nodded, too preoccupied staring at the meat to spare the man a single glance. "Then take your time and enjoy the meal." "Oh, I'd like some water and snacks myself," Elenily said, calling after him. "Sure thing," the proprietor hollered over his shoulder. Elenily sank into her seat. "I'm completely exhausted. I've been through pregnancy countless times, but it never gets any easier." "Uh-huh. But I wonder why it is. I haven't grown to dislike it after going through it so many times." "Uh-huh. Speaking of which, your mating season should be starting soon, too. Isn't it about time you found yourself a partner? If you'd like, I'd be happy to pair you up with someone." "Uh-huh." Ghislaine never so much as glanced at Elenilys. She simply waited with her knife and fork at hand, staring at the slab of steaming meat. Drool dripped down her chin. There is no need to wait on my account. Go ahead and eat," said Elenilys. "You sure?" "Of course. It won't be any good if it gets cold." "Meat is always good, even cold." Even as she said that, Ghislaine began devouring the thick steak. It was a little rare, but it was still cooked through, which was the perfect way to prepare a fresh piece of meat like this. Ghislaine sawed through it, stabbed into a chunk, and tucked it into her mouth. It was slathered in tangy sauce, which eliminated the gaminess, giving it a savory smell and flavor. It was rare enough to be a little tender, but that was just right for Ghislaine. She tore into it, letting its natural juices fill her mouth. This was heaven. Ghislaine continued cutting her meat and devouring it, letting her cheeks fill with juice as she chewed. Once she swallowed, she was back to cutting another bite. She was silent the whole time, completely ignoring Alinalise's presence. Alinalise didn't mind, resting her cheek against her hand and watching. Is it good? In that case, I was right to pick this place. Alinalise was the one who'd clued Ghislaine in about the stakes here, since they had the fortune of reuniting after such a long time. Alinalise decided to invite Ghislaine out for dinner for a chat. Naturally, she picked the exact type of pub that Ghislaine loved. "Here you go," announced the proprietor as he arrived with Alinalise's order. Ghislaine had already inhaled half of her steak by that point. "How unusual for you," she commented. "Not going to drink?" Now that her how unusual for you, she commented. "Not going to drink?" Now that her stomach was no longer completely empty, she noticed that Alinalise had only ordered water. "Yes, alcohol would be the better fit for our happy reunion and the depressing conversation we're about to have, but alas, I can't partake," Alinalise said, lightly tapping her swollen stomach. "Okay, then." Ghislaine didn't bother trying to pressure her. "Recently, I actually tried to have some alcohol myself, but Sylphie stopped me, treated me like a child, telling me it was a no-no." Alinalise wore a vacant expression as she caressed her stomach. Ghislaine frowned. "Heard you got married, but I never figured you'd be this devoted to one guy." "It's a surprise for me, too, but Cliff is a wonderful man. Sure, he's not very flexible and doesn't listen, but he's self-confident and has a strong sense of responsibility. When we have sex, he goes all out. He doesn't simply focus on his own pleasure. He tries his best to make sure I feel good as well. It's so utterly adorable. Oh, Ghislaine, you should try to find someone for yourself soon, too." "I'll pass." Ghislaine brushed off the romance talk without a second thought. She had already given up on living as a woman, choosing instead to focus on leading her life as a sword fighter. "Well, I won't force you. More importantly." Alinalise paused, lifting her glass and raising it toward Ghislaine. Ghislaine put her knife down and took up her flagon. "To a fond reunion between friends," said Alinalise. "Yeah, cheers." They both clinked their cups, a pleasantly resonant sound. The two former members of the Black Wolf Fangs had finally come together again. "It would have been better if Tall Hand and Geese were here to join us," Alinalise murmured. "Paul and Zenith, too." In an instant, what was supposed to be a joyous meeting turned gloomy. But that was exactly why Alinalise had come here. To have that conversation. "About Paul. It's a shame what happened to him. It's a shame what happened. In a better world, I would have been the first one to go, not him." "He lived fast and reckless," said Ghislaine. "I figured he'd meet his end sooner rather than later." "Yeah, I seem to remember you saying something like that a long time ago." Ghislaine shook her head. "You're the one who said it." "Oh, really?" "Yep, but the fact that he's gone isn't that surprising to me." "Paul went out with a bang, though," said Alinalise. "Care to hear the story?" "Yeah, tell me." Alinalise recounted the story as Ghislaine requested. She started by explaining how Paul got separated from his family and searched desperately for them, how despite his womanizing ways he turned temptations away and insisted on remaining loyal to Zenith. He also shared how his reunion with Rudius went in Begarit, how the two had talked and how happy Paul had looked. Finally, she recalled the details of their battle and how Paul died protecting Rudius. "Huh," Ghislaine grunted. "He sure changed. Hard to believe that's the same man who always did stupid crap with you." "Oh? I seem to remember you being the biggest idiot of all, Ghislaine. As I recall, you would wag your tail every time you looked at Paul for a while there." "I was delusional. Must have been mating season. Besides, I'm not an Adoldia. My tail doesn't wag whenever I'm happy." "It was a figure of speech," Alinalise reassured her. "But you really were adorable back then, always fussing over Paul at every turn." "That was a long time ago. Forget about it." Alinalise sniggered, popping a sweetly seasoned bite of meat into her mouth. It wasn't as tender as Ghislaine's steak, so she had to chew a bit before swallowing. As Ghislaine watched, she decided to order the same thing. Here, you can have this. Let's order something else instead and split it between us, Elinolise said, passing her plate over to her friend. The two feasted, letting the sound of munching fill the air between them for a while. Zenith's condition was a bigger shock to me than Paul's death, said Elinolise. Once the plate was empty, Ghislaine responded. Yeah, never would have dreamed I'd see her in such a state. Indeed. Ghislaine didn't respond. It's just how it goes, I guess. We are adventurers. The fact that she's even alive now should be cause for celebration. Besides, Rudius is looking for a way to heal her. Who knows? Maybe she will return to normal herself eventually. Yeah? Well, she may be an old woman by the time that day comes. Ghislaine chuckled and drained her flagon. When that happens, hopefully we can drink together again. I hope so, too. We'll have to call in Geese and Tallhand when that day comes and have a huge party. What are those two up to, anyway? Well, after Tallhand and I split up, the two continued catching up, chatting about various topics. Elinolise talked about what had happened after they split from the group, what they did following the displacement incident, how she met Rudius. They even revisited their past adventures, such as the time they went diving into some old ruins, trying to find a legendary holy sword. Then there was the time that Geese gambled all their money away and they had to shake down some random people for funds. Another time, when Ghislaine entered her mating season, Paul jumped in to take advantage of the situation and Elinolise joined him, turning it into a sensual threesome. Most of their memories together were embarrassing, but they were precious, embedded deep within the two women's hearts. Elinolise's eyes were half crinkled shut as she jabbered away. Ghislaine had guzzled so much alcohol that she was totally smashed, her face vacant as she rested her chin on her hand. Oh dear, Elinolise said. I rarely see you drink yourself into oblivion like this. Can you get back to your room on your own? I'm fine. There are no wolves who'd bother coming after me anymore. Ghislaine shot a look over her shoulder. Even the more rugged adventurers were quick to avert their eyes. Maybe I should have taken up Lord Philip on his offer after all. Philip? Oh, you mean the one from the Fatoa region? Yeah, he asked me to become his mistress once. Oh dear, you missed a prime opportunity there. You could have been set for life if you'd agreed to that, Elinolise teased. Ghislaine smiled sadly. I couldn't have faced Eris if I had agreed. I'm shocked to hear you worry about such a thing. Elinolise tilted her head. Oh? Ghislaine's eyes were fixed on the wall, burning with fury. Lord Philip is already dead. He didn't survive the displacement incident. I gave him a proper burial and claimed the heads of the ones who killed him. Oh, my. I didn't realize. That is a shame. Lady Eris is married to Rudius now. Ghislaine lifted her head, a murderous glint in her eyes as she stared up at the ceiling. All that's left is to avenge Lord Soros. She exuded such a menacing aura that several of the patrons decided to flee, sensing danger. Elinolise wasn't shaken by it. She knew Ghislaine was capable of turning vicious on the fly and cutting someone down, but she also knew that she wouldn't be the beast woman's target. So that's why you became Her Highness's bodyguard, Elinolise surmised. Yep. Elinolise sighed and followed Ghislaine's gaze to the ceiling. You sure have changed. You didn't used to be such a fiercely loyal knight. Ghislaine froze and dropped her gaze to her glass, catching her own reflection in the amber liquid within. The answer came to her at once. I'm a member of the Doldia tribe, that's why. She abruptly stood, her gait so confident that it was hard to believe she was sloshed. Where are you going? Elinolise called after her. Home. Oh dear, you're as hasty as ever. Elinolise shrugged and lifted herself from her seat. She pulled out a silver coin from her pocket and slapped it on the counter. Then she hurried after her friend, who had already left the building and was disappearing down the dark street. Ghislaine! Ghislaine paused, ears twitching as she looked over her shoulder. While you're in the Osira Kingdom, be sure to protect Rudius and Sylphie. Those two are my adorable grandchildren, you know. Yeah. Will do. Ghislaine's tail perked up as she answered. With that, Elise turned the opposite direction, back to her humble home, where Cliff waited. Ghislaine stared after her. She grunted. Her list of things to do had suddenly increased. On the other hand, it wasn't something she had to do. Protecting those two was something she planned to do anyway. I've gotten wiser, she realized, pleased with herself. She was in high spirits as she headed back to the inn. And now we have the final image of the volume. Ghislaine and Elise departing. That is it. That is volume 16, guys. We are done. Redundancy, Oblige, and ODT are coming after what? Heroic? Okay. Or okay, you're gonna have to. The light novel is confirmed to be ending. The main story is when the next volume is translated and comes out on Kindle. The 29th of this month. Gotcha. Yeah, next month is when they're 29th of this month of September. I need to update. The light novel is confirmed after confirmed to end at 26, which is out in November. Well, out in Japan, not here in the US. The next one to be translated is 19. 19 is the next one that's going to get translated. And that'll be on Kindle. Actually, I need to look that up. Ah, crap. I don't want to. Okay, no, actually, that's fine. I'm doing good. Let's see. I can open all these tabs back up. I got 12 tabs. Wonderful. And let me go to Amazon. By the way, guys, I forgot to mention that I do have some new stuff in my Amazon wish list. So right now it's gonna take some time, but I'm gonna get a Focusrite Scarlett audio interface and a Rode NT1 mic and the kit that comes with it. So those are all things I'm looking forward to eventually getting, along with some female XLR cables, things like that. Just good stuff. Just stuff that eventually I will need to improve upon all of this stuff, especially because I'm using this stream setup. I want to have a better audio quality if I'm doing those kind of things. Let's check out the light novel list. Where is it? Shopping list, SAO books. See more. Stupid gnat flew into my nose. Do you have any idea how much that freaking sucks? Damn, that bothers me. Okay. Okay, I already have this one. Delete. Delete that one because I already got 18. Okay, cool. Okay, so 19 is actually going to deal with stuff with Zenoba, and I think 20 starts. Yeah, okay. So Kindle, $9.99 on Kindle. Okay, you can pre-order. It comes out on the 29th. And let's see if they have 20 up yet. No, they don't. They don't have 20 up here yet. Oh, no, they do. It's saying January 31st, so it'll probably be December when it comes out. December or November, depending on how late. Now, the paperback version is going to come out at the end of January, so I'm thinking like mid-December for the Kindle version. And actually, that one looks really nice because it's got Rudy in kind of fancy clothes. By the way, I've also seen the cover of 26. That looks pretty cool. I like the cover art for that. Let's see. let's add this. Let's add to the light novels list. Yeah, there we go. We can add that in. Alrighty. So yeah, it comes out on the 29th of this month. That'll be pretty cool. Get that going. Yeah, 29th of September. You don't know how to pronounce Eroica either, but I think it's... You think that's the name? Redundancy is the standard. Side stories. Oblige is about spoiler. And ODT goes into the detail about what the different faces in world were. Oh, the Scarlet Solo is worth it. Faces of the cube, that is the world, because the world of Mushoku Tensei is not round. Ah. No, the Scarlets well. I have 2 of them myself and an AI 18i20 for the main rig and a 2i2 for the portable recording. Well, shit, you got some expensive stuff there. But yeah, guys, those are the things I'm looking at to make everything look and sound better. I want to get those before we jump into Log Horizon, which honestly we'll probably get into around November, because it's not going to take us long to catch up on these at all. We are now 15, 16, okay, 17, 18. We will probably have 19. We are probably going to catch up to 19, and then after that, it's going to be all good. So we've got Sylphie, Ariel, Rudius, Triss, Rita, and Albert on the cover of this one. Or not the cover, but the drawing of that. And then we have Luke, Ariel, Rudy, Albert, and the water god lady on the actual cover. And that's when... So next week we will start volume 17. Where did you find the cover? Find the 26 cover? Are you sure it wasn't the 25? No, literally, where did I find it? Anime News Network. They were talking about it on that. It's going to be one of the things we actually cover tomorrow. The article about the 26th volume. 25 has the black hair boy with a sword. Yeah, 26 is literally Rudius sitting in front of a book. In his nice formal attire, he's turning the page of the book and he's got a quill in hand. I think it's his diary. So that's 26. It shows it on the news article on Anime News Network talking about volume 26, because the cover art for 26 has been released. That having been said, though, guys, for those of you watching on YouTube, thank you so much for coming by. I am curious to hear what you all think of these light novel readings, of course, but specifically this volume and this giant chapter. Let me know what you thought of what we went through today. I'm curious to hear in your in the comments down below. Now, guys, if you get caught up with these later and you check them out later, still want your ideas, your thoughts, and your comments. I always look forward to seeing what all of you think about the story, where we're at so far, and how things are going. That having been said, thank you so much for coming by. I look forward to it. If you would leave a like and subscribe if you like this kind of content and you want to see more, let me know. That having been said, thank you guys so much. We will see you on the next one. Until then, bye-bye for now. Bye, YouTube.